We're going to go back to Courtney Cuby now, who has been working her sources, so plugged in there at the Pentagon. Courtney, what can you tell our viewers now?
Yeah, Tom, I'm sorry. It is developing very quickly here. So we now have, according to 2 U.S. officials, that in fact Iran did fire short and medium-range missiles at Al Udeid. They were shot down by air defense systems. There are no reports of any casualties at this point. The officials telling us that attack has ended. The reason that I'm saying there were no reports of any casualties at this point is, remember what happened after the U.S. killed Qasem Soleimani in Iraq. Iran retaliated with a number of ballistic missiles fired at at Al-Assad, a base in western Iraq that houses U.S. troops. And while in the immediate aftermath of those missiles being fired, and remember, in that case, they actually did impact the base. There were initially no reports of major casualties, but then as time developed, there were a number of service members and even civilians who developed cases of traumatic brain injury and other sort of concussive blasts. Now, at this point, again, no casualties, no injuries reported. The belief is that all of these missiles were, in fact, intercepted. There was no impact. We are asking about sort of the next steps here, of course, and that is, remember, when you shoot down a missile, there can be debris that can fall to the ground if there's anything that was impacted by possible debris falling to the ground, and we're still working on some of the specifics about those short and medium-range missiles, specifically how many were fired and exactly how close any of them actually got to Al Udeid. Again, this is developing very quickly, but U.S. officials now, in fact, confirming that Al Udeid, the base housing up to 5,000 Americans in Qatar, was targeted tonight by Iranian missiles. Now, remember, we've been talking about this over the last several days, but as the tensions increased between Israel and Iran, as they continue to trade fire back and forth, and as the U.S. started talking about the possibility of the military strikes that occurred in Iran over the weekend, the U.S. took some mitigating measures to try to protect Americans and assets from the possibility of this sort of a strike by Iran. That included moving some aircraft out and some personnel. But we do not have indications that the base was fully evacuated in advance of this attack, Tom.
And then, Courtney, you know, the Trump administration has been very clear that they don't want a long-term war with Iran, right? But what are you hearing from inside the Pentagon? Is it still just too early to know if there is another strike from the U.S.? I mean, we're still sort of getting all the information in from this retaliatory strike, but with no injuries so far, no casualties that we know of, and we're waiting on if there's even any damage so far. Does the U.S. have to flex any muscle in retaliation to this kind of strike?
Yeah, I imagine that the U.S., going into the strikes in Iran over the weekend, had a number of plans in place for what they could do if, in fact, Iran retaliated, and sort of the levels of retaliation, right? So there's what we're seeing right now, which is an attack on, at this point, one installation with the U.S. in the region. It seems at this point it was unsuccessful. Officials again telling us that at this point it is over. But if there hasn't been damage, if there have not been casualties, is it possible that the U.S. is not going to respond? Again, I point back to after the Qasem Soleimani death, after the U.S. took out Qasem Soleimani in Iraq, Iran retaliated. You know, there can be these back and forths, but they sort of can also fizzle out if, in fact, there's no deaths incurred or no infrastructure. But I imagine that is the top topic of conversation right now in that Situation Room and among defense officials. And no matter what, I imagine that they are presenting options to President Trump as we speak, or drawing up new options should he decide that he wants to respond back to what is at this point, appears to be retaliation by Iran for the U.S. military strikes in Iran over the weekend.
All right, Courtney, you stand by for us.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app, or watch live on our YouTube channel.